When I first read this story, I had a physical reaction to the end of it because it comes completely out of left field. You're not ready for it, and it's so horrifying. And no, I'm not just hyping the video. Wait until you hear the ending. It's pretty intense. So fair warning, it's tough to listen to, but it's a great story. I hope you enjoy it. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please invite the like button to your destination wedding and assure them the dress code is 100% casual, but then actually have a black tie wedding. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story. Back in 1994, an 11-year-old named Mark was living just outside of Philadelphia with his family. And for the past few summers, he and his siblings would go up to this summer camp on Mount Kitney in a rural part of New Jersey, and they would stay there for about 8 weeks every summer. And this year would be no different, so on June 23rd, Mark and his siblings and his family loaded up the minivan, and they began their 2.5-hour commute up to Mount Kitney. When they arrived, the parking lot is filled with parents dropping off their kids, and there's already a batch of campers that had arrived already that are coming down to meet the new campers. And in the middle of all of this chaos, one of Mark's friends from the previous summer, his name was Kyle, he was the same age as Mark, he saw Mark and he runs down and he excitedly tells Mark that they had been placed in the same cabin this year. And so Mark is thrilled. The summer is already off to a great start. So for the next hour or so, Mark and his siblings and Kyle, they began moving all of their stuff up to the cabins. And then at some point, all the parents left and all the campers were instructed to head over to the big dining hall where the camp director and some of the camp counselors were going to go over expectations and scheduling over the next few days. So Mark and Kyle make their way over to the dining hall. They sit down at one of the long tables next to a couple of their buddies, and they listen in while the director goes over the rules and the regulations. And the director would make a special point, like they do every year, to remind all the campers that the faraway dock is absolutely off limits. So don't ask about it, don't try to swim out to it, just leave it alone. The main cluster of buildings that made up the camp was situated right up against this huge man-made lake that was quite long and fairly narrow, and on one side of this lake was the designated swimming area, and then this side they didn't even use for the camp. And within the swimming section, there was a main dock that extended fairly far out into the water that they divided. On one side was the weaker swimmers, and on the other side of the dock was the more advanced swimmers. And then farther out past the dock were these 2 floating docks, these square floating docks. There was one that was maybe about 10 meters away from the head of the main dock. And then there was the so-called faraway dock that was absurdly far away. In fact, no one really knew why I was out there to begin with. It was at least 100 meters away from the head of the main dock. There were lots of conspiracy theories about why the faraway dock was actually off limits, because the camp staff never actually explicitly said what their reasoning was for not allowing anyone to go near it. They just said it was very dangerous. Most campers believed it was just because the faraway dock was so far away. It was a dangerous swim to be making, even for an experienced swimmer. Other campers had heard a rumor that years earlier, someone had swam out and then gotten sucked underneath. There was apparently some suction underneath this dock, and they got sucked underneath and they drowned. And then the most outlandish conspiracy theory was the dock was not actually a dock at all. It was a lid that was covering over a secret tunnel that went into the lake. But regardless of whichever conspiracy theory the campers believed in, the faraway dock had developed a very spooky reputation, and they did not need to be told twice to not go near it. No one's going there. Well, unless you're Kyle. After the director and some of the counselors had gone up and spoken, the campers were allowed to finish their meal and then make their way back to their cabins. So Mark and Kyle finish their meal and they start walking back. They go into their cabin. They're getting set up in their bed. Their 2 other cabin mates come in and they're all kind of chatting and joking around. And at some point they turn off the lights and they want to go to bed. And after a little while, after the lights have been turned off in the cabin and everyone's trying to sleep, Kyle breaks the silence by saying, "Hey guys, I really want to swim out to the faraway dock this summer." Now, Mark and the other 2 that were in there with Kyle had heard Kyle say this before. He talked incessantly the summer before about wanting to swim out to the faraway dock, but he never did, and he really never showed any serious attempt at wanting to go out there. And so when he's saying this now, they're not taking him seriously at all. And so they kind of laughed and said, "Yeah, it's pretty creepy, that dock out there. I wonder why we can't go out there." and they kind of had a quick discussion about, the various hot theories around why you can't go out there, and ultimately they just kind of wrote it off and went to sleep. The next morning, Mark and Kyle got up and began their walk over to the dining hall to get some breakfast. And on the walk, Kyle says to Mark, "Hey, I want to swim out to the faraway dock today at lunch. Will you come with me?" And so to this point, Mark has only ever heard Kyle talk about the faraway dock and going to it in theory. There's never been a timestamp of this is when we're going to do it. And all of a sudden, Mark's thinking, Kyle might be serious. He might actually want to do this. And so Mark looks at Kyle and he's like, "Are you sure that's a good idea? Because I know there's lots of theories about why we can't go out there, but it's pretty clear the camp counselor and the director believe it's a dangerous place." And Kyle just kind of smirks and he's like, I don't believe that. My dad told me that dock is probably just rotting and that's why they don't want us to be on it. And so I think as long as we're not jumping on it and we stay towards the edge of the dock on the main beams, we should be fine. At this point, Mark wants to convince Kyle not to do it. So he takes another approach. And he goes, "Well, Kyle, what about the swim out there? I mean, that's a difficult swim and, you're not their best swimmer. So how do you feel about that?" And Kyle shrugs and he's like, "We'll just take some pool noodles and we'll take our time going out there. And hey, if I start drowning, you can just rescue me." Mark started to get the sense that this was going to happen whether he participated or not. And Mark's thinking to himself, if he goes and he's successful at getting out to the faraway dock and I basically back out because I'm too scared to go, I'm going to have a whole summer of living that down and spending all my time with this guy who's going to rub it in my face. And so Mark didn't know what else to say to Kyle and he just says, "All right, if you go, I'll go with you." So Mark and Kyle go in, they have their breakfast, and then afterwards they split up because they each had different activities that morning. And so they don't see each other for a couple of hours. And then it comes to be lunchtime, and Mark knows this is the time they were going to swim out to the faraway dock. And he's hoping as he's walking towards the dining hall that somehow Kyle's forgotten or has changed his mind. And as he gets right in front of the dining hall, he hears Kyle yell his name, and he looks to the side of the building. There's this big forest right next to the dining hall, and he sees Kyle, and he's got his bathing suit on and his pool noodle in hand. He's got an extra one as well. And next to Kyle are his two other cabin mates who also have bathing suits on and are also holding pool noodles. Mark's pretty disappointed at this point because now it's really happening. He had put on his bathing suit, so he's ready. And he walks over to Kyle and his other two cabin mates, and the whole time he's kind of hoping that a camp counselor or one of the directors will see him and will question them and stop them from doing what they're about to do. And so he's kind of taking his time, looking over his shoulder, trying to be extra suspicious as he walks across this field. Like, "Look at me, I'm doing something bad. I hope no one catches me." And he makes it to the tree line and no one catches him. And Kyle hands him his pool noodle. And then Kyle and the other two cabin mates turn and start kind of walking/running into the woods, and Mark follows after them. And as they're running, Kyle turns around and tells Mark that their cabin mates didn't want to be left out, and that's why they're here. And Mark had a sinking feeling that probably they had the same reaction that he did, which is, if I don't do this with him, he's going to rub this in my face for the whole summer, and I'm living with him. And I'd rather just swim to this horrible dock than put up with that for the whole summer. And so they finally make it to the swimming area, and they have their main dock that juts out into the water, and then there's the closer floating dock, and then way over there is the faraway dock. And as soon as they get onto the beach, they're kind of exposed, and the main camp, if they were down at the water's edge, they could look and see them if they were looking in that direction. And so the boys immediately get into the water and they put themselves up against the main dock, kind of obscuring them from view from anybody that's over at the main side of camp. And they begin swimming out to the faraway dock. The swim out was super easy. It's beautiful outside, it's sunny, the water feels great. They had their pool noodles to rest on, so not much energy to actually do the swim itself. And they were taking their time because they had at least about an hour and a half to 2 hours before they'd need to be back at camp before someone recognized they were gone. And so they get about 3/4 of the way out to the faraway dock, and it's the first time they can see it more or less up close. Because before this, none of them had been to the faraway dock and had never been close to the faraway dock. So this is the first time they're really getting a good look at it. And the dock is pretty unremarkable. It looks a little bit more beat up than the other dock. The wood is more gray, and it looks like there's probably a good amount of splinters on there, but it definitely does not look like it's so rotten that if they climb on it, it's going to collapse under their weight, which makes them happy because now they know they can actually get on it and take a break from swimming for a second. But they were kind of let down. They're nearing this thing that's become almost like folklore within their camp, and it's just kind of a huge letdown that it looks like any other dock. They finally made their way right up to the ladder, which was fairly rusted over, and Mark was actually the first one to be in front of the ladder, and he was about to grab it and step onto it when he stops. and the other three are right behind him, and they're like, what? And he goes, look at that. And on the ladder is this thick-bodied, wide, fat spider with long legs that's just perched on the rung of the ladder. And so the boys all see the spider, and they're like, okay, number one, I'm not touching that ladder. I'm gonna be climbing up somewhere else. I'll figure out a way to get on this dock that does not involve this ladder. And two, how did the spider get out here? It's huge. What is it doing out here? Like, where did it come from? There's no land around us. But they're like, you know what, whatever. There's one random spider on this dock. Can't be a big deal. And so they make their way over to the side, so away from the ladder. And Mark actually grabs onto the edge of the dock, the wood, and manages to pull himself up, and they push him up as he gets up there. And Mark turns around and he hoists up Kyle, and they end up hoisting up the next two. And before long, you have all four on the dock, and they're looking at each other and they're feeling pretty good about it. Even though it was a letdown that there's not much going on out here besides maybe that weird spider, but it'll make for a great story. And they couldn't wait to get back and tell their friends that they had made it out to the faraway dock. So they weren't ready to just jump right back in the water and go right back to shore. So they laid down on the wooden slats of the dock itself, and they just enjoyed laying in the sun. And as Mark's laying there, he hears a very distinctive scratching sound or rustling sound that's coming from right underneath the floorboards that he's laying on. And the dock itself was resting on these big blue barrels to stay afloat. And so Mark's laying there thinking maybe the barrel is rotating underneath the wood and it's causing a weird sound, or maybe there's some residual waves from us moving around and displacing the water that's, you know, lapping up against the side of the barrels. But Mark at the time was not really overanalyzing this. This is just his initial thoughts of what the sound could be. He's not remotely concerned about what the sound is. He just took stock of it. And at some point, Mark and the other guys stand up because they're kind of bored of just laying there, and they start goofing around and pushing each other and trying to see if they can push each other off of the dock. And then they start playing one of their favorite games that they play on the other floating dock, where they all kind of shimmy to one corner of the dock and try to get that side to begin to submerge without falling off. So the boys shuffle to the corner of the dock, and they're all kind of jokingly jockeying for position, you know, because they're gonna flood this side and they don't want to fall off. And so they get in position and the dock starts to sink. And so after about a third of the dock was now underwater, they start hearing a scratching sound like the one Mark had heard when he was laying on his back. And all of a sudden, hundreds of those huge, thick-bodied, long-legged spiders start coming out from underneath the dock through the breaks in the wood. They're pouring out frantically, trying to climb out from underneath the dock because the boys have just flooded their nest. And so hundreds of these things are pouring out from underneath and sliding down towards the boys because it's on an angle. And Kyle, in a panic, loses his footing and falls face first onto the dock. But because his weight shifted so quickly, the dock went down flat again, and now Kyle's laying on the dock as these spiders are swarming his body, getting in his hair, and Mark and the other two are still on the dock, and they can feel the spiders at their feet, and they jump into the water. And Mark, as soon as he hits the water, he sees there's hundreds of spiders in the water. They're all over the place, and that's when he feels one in his hair, and he's trying to swat it off of his head, and he dives underwater thinking that's going to get rid of it, but no, he feels it grip down tight on his hair, and he had to reach up and actually grab the body of the spider and pull it off of his hair. He swims up, there's more spiders around him. He frantically starts swimming away, and he hears Kyle screaming, and he sees him jump into the water, still trying to pull spiders off of his body. And then the boys would swim as fast as humanly possible to shore, the whole time either literally pulling spiders out of their hair that were clinging to their hair or their ears, or believing, because they just had this horrible experience, that there are more spiders on them. And so the whole time, you know, they're pulling spiders off even if they aren't there. Like Ricky Bobby in Talladega Nights, he thinks he's on fire when he's not. That's the situation they're in, but with spiders. They finally get to shore, and they're looking each other over to make sure there's no more spiders on them, in their shorts, on their back, in their hair, in their ears. And finally, all the spiders are gone and they're safe again. Mark said he'll never get over the trauma of this horrifying event. And he says what really gets to him is when he thinks about when he was laying on his back on the dock and the other three were doing the same thing, and he heard that rustling, that scratching sound. That was the sound of hundreds of these massive spiders that were literally inches away from them, perched underneath the dock. And not just any spider, but the dock spider. And they're named that because they make their home in docks, because they typically hunt for fish, small fish, insects as well, and they have the ability to run on water. They have this waxy substance on their legs that keeps them from sinking, and they can even jump on water and then land again on water to avoid being eaten by fish. and they can go underwater for up to 30 minutes. They can effectively scuba dive because they trap air on their hairy arms and underneath their bellies, and they breathe that while they're underwater. And so these spiders identified the faraway dock as a great spot to live, and they must have ran out on the water to this dock and then made a home underneath, and then no one's disturbing them, so they flourished. Later on, Mark would find out from one of the camp counselors that the real reason the faraway dock was off limits, the reason that they didn't want anyone going out there, is because they discovered the faraway dock was a breeding ground for these dock spiders. And they tried to get rid of them, but they kept coming back. And so after a number of failed attempts, they finally just gave the faraway dock to the dock spiders. And the reason they don't tell the campers about it is because they don't want to scare them. And so that's that. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you found the secret in today's episode, please tell us what it is in the comments section and give us the timestamp where it's located in the episode. And if you're the first to do that, we'll pin you at the top of the comments section. If you enjoyed today's video and you haven't done this already, please invite the like button to your destination wedding and tell them it is totally 100% casual dress code, but then actually have a black tie wedding. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our 3, 4, even 5 weekly uploads. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram or on Twitter. My username for both platforms is the same. It's just JohnBallen416. I also have a ton of content over on TikTok where my username is MrBallen. If you have a story suggestion, please submit it to our subreddit just called Mr. Ballen. It's linked in the description below. So whether I see you on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, some combination, just know that I really appreciate your support. And until next time, that's going to do it. See ya. This story is why we tell our kids not to talk to strangers. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please print out the final picture of Lawana the Bloodthirster, but be careful not to look at it completely. Always avert your eyes so you don't get a full shot of this picture. Once it's printed out, fold it up so you can't see it, put it inside of a birthday card, and mail that to the like button. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story. In 1978, a 9-year-old girl named Kim was walking to the corner store to get some pasta sauce for her mother. On her walk home, a man she had never met before walks up behind her and speeds up to where he's walking in step with her. And he looks at her and introduces himself and says, "Hi, I'm Dr. Ramsey. I'm a pediatrician. Do you know what a pediatrician is?" And Kim immediately had a bad vibe about this Dr. Ramsey character. There was just something odd about him. The fact that he had approached her so suddenly and was right on top of her. So her reaction was to not answer his questions and instead put her head down and walk even faster because she knows she's almost at her house. She's almost at safety. And if she can just get there, she doesn't have to deal with this strange man. But as she sped up, so too did Dr. Ramsey, staying in step with her, and he begins peppering her with additional questions and comments. "Are your parents looking for a pediatrician for you?" "Of course they are. You're a big girl now. How old are you? What's your name? Your hair is so beautiful. Where do you live?" When Kim got to be about 10 meters away from her house, she just takes off running, and she bolts up her back steps through the kitchen door into her house, slams the door behind her, and for a few seconds, she just stands there, almost anticipating hearing this Dr. Ramsey guy come up the back steps behind her. But he doesn't, and after a couple of minutes, she pokes her head around and looks out the window, and he's not there anymore. And she feels completely relieved that that weird guy is now gone and she can just forget about it. But it turns out she couldn't just forget about this because Dr. Ramsey was not going away anytime soon. It wasn't long after this first initial interaction with Dr. Ramsey that Kim was home one day and she happened to be looking out her front window to the road, and she sees a blue Ford Galaxy drive slowly by their property. And she's looking at the car and she can tell immediately that the person driving it is Dr. Ramsey. But Dr. Ramsey doesn't see her. She's kind of obscured behind curtains on the window, and she's watching him, and he was looking at their front door and he was waving as if there was someone standing on their front steps, but Kim knew there wasn't. And so he bizarrely just drove the rest of the way past their property, waving the whole time, and then drove off. Now at this point, Kim has not told her mom or her dad or her siblings about Dr. Ramsey, because that first interaction, she kind of chalked it up to maybe her being paranoid and maybe even being a little bit rude that she ran away from this doctor who was just trying to talk to her. But now that she's seen him drive past her house and he's acting strange, her alarm bells are starting to go off. but she doesn't tell her parents quite yet. But the next day, when Kim was playing outside, a car drove by and she turned to look at it, and it was the blue Ford Galaxy, and who was driving? Dr. Ramsey. And he slows down and he waves to her and he smiles at her as he passes by, and she kind of looks at him like, what are you doing? At this point, Kim knows he's acting inappropriately. Whatever his angle is, it just didn't feel right. So she runs inside and she explains to her mom that when she went to the store to get that pasta sauce on her way back, this strange man, Dr. Ramsey, approached her. She came back to the house. Now I've seen him twice outside of our property and he's clearly waving at me. There's something wrong with this guy. Kim's mother reacted to this news the way most of us would, which is, you're talking about a doctor in this nice neighborhood who's driving down the road saying hi to my kid, and he claims he's a pediatrician. Like, that's a child's doctor. It makes sense he might be waving to kids. That's part of his job, talking and interacting with kids. And so her mother says this can't be a big deal. I'm sure he just works in the area and this is part of his commute going down this road, and now you've seen him a couple days in a row. It's just a coincidence. But shortly after this, when Dr. Ramsey started calling their house, Kim's mother and father very quickly ditched the "he's a doctor so we can trust him" routine and became very concerned. A couple of days after Kim had told her mother about Dr. Ramsey, Kim gets called into the living room where her father's sitting, and he looks very troubled. And he calls her over and has her sit down, and he says, "You're not in trouble. I just need you to talk me through exactly what happened when Dr. Ramsey approached you. Your mother told me about it, and there's been a couple weird things that have happened here, and I just got to hear the story from you." And so Kim goes through the story. She describes how she was leaving the store. He just kind of showed up, and Kim did not talk to him. She put her head down and basically ran back to the house, and that was it. Kim's father reacts to this like he's totally perplexed about something, that he's hearing the facts, but they don't make any sense. And he says to Kim, "Are you sure you didn't say anything to him?" Kim said, "No, I was scared. I didn't say anything." And Kim's father's like, "Then how did he know your name?" Kim was like, "What do you mean?" And her father said, "Well, just the other day, I got a phone call from someone saying they were Dr. Ramsey, and they asked to speak with you, Kim, by name. They said, 'Can I speak to Kim?' And I thought that was odd because, you're my child." And I said, "Well, why do you need to speak to my daughter? Why can't you speak to me? I'm her father. You're a doctor, you can speak to me." And they hung up. And then they called back again, and they asked for you by name again, as if they hadn't heard me the first time. And so I said again, "Why do you need to talk to my daughter? You can just talk to me, I'm her parent." At which time they hung up again. And so I wanted to hear from you directly if you had given your name to him, because the fact that he knew your name on that call seems really odd to me. Kim assured her father that she did not give him her name. And you got to remember that this is back in 1978, so Dr. Ramsey would not have been able to use the internet to try to find Kim's name, nor would Kim's name have been listed in a telephone book because she was a minor. It would have been her father or her mother that was listed in the telephone book. So in order for Dr. Ramsey to have her name, he would need to know someone that would give up her name or do some digging, which is obviously very creepy considering the fact that Kim has never met him before. He's a strange older man and she's a 9-year-old girl. So with that in mind, Kim and her parents are on edge about this Dr. Ramsey character, but they don't have any clear recourse because he didn't do anything that was criminal. They couldn't go to the police and say he figured out our daughter's name, because they would be saying a doctor, a pediatrician no less, knows our child's name and was waving and smiling at her. But shortly after this, Dr. Ramsey's behavior would take a dark turn. He would call Kim's house again just a couple of days after those first two calls, and Kim's father would answer, and right away, Dr. Ramsey says, "I need to talk to Kim." And Kim's father goes into protective mode and he says, "Do not call this house again," and he hangs up. But seconds later, the phone is ringing again, and at this point, the family has come in the room because they heard their father screaming at someone on the phone. The phone's ringing, and their father picks the phone up and puts it back in the receiver, canceling the call. And he looks at his family and he says, "Do not answer the phone." The phone rings again. He picks it up and cancels it again. On and on, the phone rang incessantly all night until they disconnected the phone line. The next day, when they plugged the phones back in, Kim's parents told all of the kids, "Do not answer the phone. No matter what, don't answer the phone." And once again, the phone starts ringing, and Kim's father picks it up. He doesn't say anything, and he hears on the other end of the line, Dr. Ramsey asking for Kim. And he says, "Do not call this house again," and he slams it, thinking that's going to do it, but of course it doesn't. And over the next several days, anytime the phone was plugged in, it was practically a non-stop call from Dr. Ramsey. And one time when Kim's father did pick up the phone, he reacted to it like it was some horrible thing being told to him, and he put it down, he disconnected the phone, and he went into the kitchen. And one of Kim's brothers overhears their father talking to their mother in a hushed tone, and he's saying to her, "He just told me he's going to hurt Kim unless he can speak to her." After this threat was made, things got very complicated. Back in the 1970s, there weren't any stalking laws that would protect Kim and her family from Dr. Ramsey. Even though Dr. Ramsey had just threatened Kim, there was no proof he had done that, and he hadn't done anything physical, and so there wasn't any legal recourse. The police couldn't really do anything. And so Kim's father ends up calling one of his friends, who happens to be a police officer. He explains the situation, and he says, "Would you mind for the next little bit just escorting my daughter Kim to and from school, because we don't want her to be out walking around by herself with this guy rolling around the neighborhood." The friend says yes, and he began bringing Kim to and from school, and Kim felt a lot safer with her father's friend because you have this police officer that's walking around with you. But it also isolated Kim in a really major way. She wasn't really allowed to go outside anymore without an escort, which meant her life was confined largely to being inside almost 24/7, and there was no clear resolution in sight for how to handle Dr. Ramsey. And so it was like this indefinite period of time that Kim was just not going to be allowed to have a normal life. Once Dr. Ramsey was completely cut off from any interaction with Kim, I mean, she barely went outside, and when she did, she was with this police escort, and she never answered the phone. Once that was going on, Dr. Ramsey became desperate. One evening, Kim, her sister, two of her brothers, and her mother were in the kitchen chatting when one of her brothers suddenly reacts like he sees something out the back window that leads out to their garage. And he runs over and he's looking out, and Kim and her family are turning to him saying, "What do you see? What's going on?" And he goes, "There's someone in the garage." And they all run to the windows and they're looking out, and there's a window on the side of their garage. Their garage was detached from their house. And there's a window on the side, and there was this man there standing there looking out at them. And once he saw that everybody is looking at him, he ducked his head down. And as Kim's family is looking at each other like, did we really just see someone in the window? Because it's kind of dark and they're not there anymore. Suddenly, the garage door slowly rises up, and out pops a man who stands up, looks at them just long enough that Kim yells, "That's Dr. Ramsey, I saw him, that's Dr. Ramsey." And then the guy takes off down the driveway away from their house. And Kim's two brothers immediately run out the house and chase him down the road, but eventually he darts into another property and he disappears and they can't find him. Kim's mother calls the police, they show up, they take down some statements, and they basically say, "Look, if he comes back, let us know, but for now, just go back in your house and lock the doors and keep an eye out." For 2 weeks after the garage incident, they didn't hear from Dr. Ramsey and they didn't see Dr. Ramsey, and it was this great reprieve from this very stressful time in their lives. But after those 2 weeks, Kim's father walked outside onto their front porch, and he saw their beloved German Shepherd was dead, lying off the side of the porch. And he goes over to the dog, and it looks like it's been roughed up, but it's hard to tell what actually happened to it. Now, at first, the family is absolutely devastated about the loss of their beloved animal. But shortly after that, they start thinking, do you think Dr. Ramsey could have had something to do with the death of our dog? And so Kim's father calls the police and says, "I think our stalker, Dr. Ramsey, killed our dog." But the police would say there was no evidence to suggest anybody killed your dog. It could have just been an accident. Also, we haven't even been able to identify who this Dr. Ramsey person is because there are no Dr. Ramseys in this town. And so probably he's using a fake name. So the family's sad and frustrated, but once again has nothing they can do about this. That night, Kim and her family are sitting at home. They're all very sad about the loss of their dog, and the phone rings. Now, prior to this, there had been 2 weeks where Dr. Ramsey hadn't called once. And so Kim's father picks the phone up and says, "Hello?" And it's Dr. Ramsey. But unlike all the other calls where Dr. Ramsey almost always began with "put Kim on the phone," this time he started with, "There are 7 people in your house right now. Your wife's in the kitchen, you're in the living room, your 3 sons are watching TV in the den, and your 2 daughters are upstairs in their respective bedrooms." Kim's father is obviously horrified to hear this because it was all accurate, and he just screams into the phone, "Stay away from my family," and he hangs up. After this phone call, Kim's father was naturally very shaken up by this because even though they knew Dr. Ramsey was probably living in the area, and he clearly drove past the property and was local, It just felt way more intimate for him to be naming things that meant he had to have been near their house recently and looking in windows. And so Kim's father runs around the house and makes sure all windows are shut and locked, blinds drawn, all the doors are locked, and then he goes all around the house to make sure all his kids and his wife and everybody's okay. And then afterwards he considered calling the police, but felt like it was kind of futile because to this point they haven't been able to help them and nothing has changed. It was just another creepy phone call. And so they don't do anything. The next day, they plugged their phone line back in because they need to use a phone, and shortly thereafter, the daily calls with Dr. Ramsey began again. And now, every call, whenever they did pick up, started with Dr. Ramsey identifying who was in the house and where they were. After a couple of days of this, the family was just living in paranoia. It was this horrible time in their lives, and one night, the phone rings, and Kim's father picks it up, ready to just scream at this guy and take out his frustrations. And Dr. Ramsey, instead of giving the report, starts by saying, "I can open your kitchen window and I can open your French doors to the side of your house." Kim's father's about to yell at him, but instead just hangs the phone up and runs into the kitchen, and he checks the window and he knows it's faulty. And clearly, so does Dr. Ramsey. And so he gets a piece of twine and he ties it over the latch and gets it as tight as he can. And then he ran over to the French doors, which were faulty. You'd have to push pretty hard, but you could, in theory, pop the doors open if you knew these were faulty doors. And so Kim's father is not taking any chances, and he gets some nails out of the junk drawer and he nails a row of nails into the ground, right into the hardwood, sitting immediately outside the frame of the door. So if you were to push on them, you would just butt up against the heads of these nails and it would keep it shut. It was his temporary solution until he ordered a proper lock to fit on the door. At this point, it was safe to say Kim and her family were living in fear that Dr. Ramsey at any given point could just break into their house, because clearly he was canvassing their house and testing different entry points, and he had already found 2. And so now they just felt totally unsafe in their house. But oddly enough, after that last call where Dr. Ramsey had said he knew the kitchen and the doors were faulty, the calls from Dr. Ramsey decreased to almost 0, and they didn't see him anywhere, and it started to feel like maybe he had gotten his thrills and he was moving on now. And it just so happened that around the time the family is starting to think this could be over, the mother and father had to go to this company function where the kids couldn't go. So the kids would be alone, but the kids said, we're fine with it. We have each other. The house will be locked. We won't go anywhere. And the parents, even though they hated the idea of their kids being alone at all, because of everything going on with Dr. Ramsey, they felt like, it does seem like he's kind of moved on and we're only going to be gone for a couple of hours, so I'm sure this is going to be fine. So that night, after her parents leave, Kim is sitting on the couch, she's watching TV, her younger brother is laying on the ground right in front of her, and her sister is sitting on the other end of the couch and she's on the phone. And Kim said she found herself looking out of her room into the kitchen towards the side of the house where those French doors were that led out into the side yard, and those doors were still only secured by the nails her father had put into the ground. The lock her father had ordered had not come in yet. Kim found herself looking at these doors, feeling really uneasy about it, and then as she was looking at it, she could have sworn she saw the doors begin to push open, and she's looking at it even more closely, and then for sure she sees the doors bow inward like someone is pushing on the top and the nails are stopping the bottom. And for a split second she sees the clear silhouette of Dr. Ramsey, and she screams. It wakes up her sister and her brother, and she's pointing at the double doors. They all look, and once again he pushes on those doors, exposing himself just for a second to the kids. So now all 3 kids have now seen this guy trying to force his way into their house, and so they scream and run right upstairs. They go into Kim's room, they shut the door, lock it, turn the lights off, and they go over to the window that's looking out to the front of their house. Now Dr. Ramsey is on the side of the house, so they wouldn't be able to see him through this window, but they're just praying that he does not break through those doors and come in the house. They're hoping they'll see him as he exits the front of their house. And they're kind of keeping an eye out the window, just praying they see this guy leave their property and leave them alone, but they don't see him leave, and they don't hear any noise downstairs or outside. It's just total silence. And they're wondering, did he already get in the house? They decide they need to look for themselves. And so they leave Kim's room and they sneak down the hall to the side room, which was their brother's room, that overlooked the area where Dr. Ramsey would be. They go over to the window and they poke their heads up and look out the window downstairs. And sure enough, there's a man standing right in front of those French doors with his hands on them, kind of looking in, looking around. And at this point, the kids suck themselves down underneath the window so that he doesn't see them. And as they're crouched down, they hear him start banging on the door downstairs, at which point Kim's sister, who was there with her, just says, "What do you want?" The banging stops and the man says, "I have a pizza, come down and get it." Kim and her siblings didn't order a pizza, so they just yell out, "If you don't leave, we're gonna call the cops." And then Kim pokes her head over the window and she looks down and she can clearly see it's Dr. Ramsey, who's now turned and he's running away from their house. Just a couple of minutes later, Kim's two older brothers return. They were out at a skating rink and they come back, they come inside, and Kim and her two younger siblings go up and tell them what happened. And immediately those two run out and start looking for him, but he's long gone by now. So they come back in, they shut all the doors, they lock everything, they shut the blinds, and they say, okay, all we can do is just get a knife out of the kitchen, each of us, and just be armed until our parents come back. So they all grab a knife, except for the youngest brother, and they all retreated to their rooms and basically just waited for their parents to come home. An hour later, Kim's parents are still gone and all the kids are still in their rooms, and her younger brother gets hungry and he decides to go down to the kitchen to get a bowl of cereal. So he goes downstairs and he's getting his cereal together and he starts feeling like someone is watching him. And he's looking around and he knows all the curtains have been drawn and everything's locked and shut, and he's just psyching himself out. But he notices the French doors that are leading to the side of the house. Those have glass panes on them and there's nothing covering them. And so as he's getting his cereal together, he finds himself constantly looking over at this door, and finally he decides, okay, I'm gonna put my cereal down and just go look out the glass, just make sure no one's there. And so he walks a little bit closer to these doors and he gets about, 5-6 feet away, and the glare from the lights above still make it impossible to look out this glass. And so he's kind of squinting his eyes, but he can't see anything. And so he steps forward and he puts his hands like this and he looks right out one of the panes of glass, and staring back at him is Dr. Ramsey, who's probably been there the whole time. And he's just standing there looking at him, and he freaks out, he screams for his brothers, and as soon as he turns back around, Dr. Ramsey has run away. He's gone. All of the siblings come pouring downstairs, knives in hand, and they're asking what's going on, and the youngest brother is trying to explain that he just saw Dr. Ramsey right on the other side of this door, and the older brothers go running outside. They're screaming for this guy. They're looking for him, but he's gone, and they all come back in the house, and they don't know what to do, and so they all stay up together in the kitchen with their knives, with everything shut and locked, just waiting for their parents to come back. And shortly after, they hear their parents using their keys to come in the house. They come in and the kids explain what happened to their parents, and the parents feel horrible. And they're like, I'm so sorry that we left. We should never have left you guys. But as horrible as this was for the family, when they call the police, they can't really do anything because he wasn't there now. Nobody got hurt. Nothing was taken. And they don't even know what this guy's name is. And so they just said, stay inside, keep everything locked, and let us know if he comes back. A couple of horrible weeks for this family goes by where they're living in constant fear. The parents are never away from their kids. The father had to take time off from work. It's just this very stressful time where they are totally prisoners in their own home. And after about 2 weeks of this, Kim is at school. She's at recess with her class outside, and she was playing on the playground when she looks out at the road and she sees Dr. Ramsey in his car parked, waving at her and yelling her name. And so Kim is horrified. She turns and runs to her teacher and she points at him and she says, that guy's stalking our family. I have to go inside and tell my parents. They immediately took this very seriously. They took Kim inside to the principal's office and they called home to Kim's mom. And when she picks up, Kim's mom explains that she just got a call from the school office asking her to verify whether her husband was going to be picking up Kim from school early. And Kim's mom said, no, he's not picking her up. There's no one picking her up early. And that's when they put it together that Dr. Ramsey must have been in touch with the school to try to convince them that he was Kim's father and he was here to pick her up. And that's why he was parked outside. Kim's mother is horrified because she's thinking to herself, if the school hadn't been diligent to confirm this, there's a chance they would have given her child to Dr. Ramsey. This proved to be kind of like the final straw. Even though there was a whole bunch of final straws along the way, this was the one that ultimately pushed Kim's father over the edge. That night, Kim was sleeping in bed when she woke up because she was thirsty, and she goes downstairs to the kitchen, and she's surprised to find her father is sitting at the kitchen table, the lights are off, and he's got a gun in front of him, and he looks totally disheveled and upset, and she knows right away that this is because of Dr. Ramsey. She's not thinking this is anything else, and so she walks over to the sink and just kind of ignores the fact that this is happening. She gets a sip of water, and then she sits down with her father and says, is everything okay? And her father looks up and he just says, no, I'm not okay. I'm tired of leaving the house and wondering if when I come home, my family's not going to be there anymore. I'm tired of not being able to protect my own kids. I'm tired of this. This has to end. Kim didn't know what to say, so she just sat there in silence with her father until he told her to go back to bed. Kim says after this night, they never heard from Dr. Ramsey again. It was like he vanished off the face of the earth. No more phone calls, no more drive-bys, no more anything. He was just gone. And while we don't know for sure what happened to Dr. Ramsey, think it's safe to assume that Kim's father had something to do with it. So that's gonna do it, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you found the secret in today's video, let us know in the comments what it is and where it's located in the video, what the timestamp is. And if you're the first to do that, we will pin you at the top of the comments section. If you enjoyed today's video and you haven't done this already, please hire someone on Upwork to print out the final picture of Lawana the Bloodthirster and have them fold that up, put it in a birthday card, and mail it to the like button. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our 3, 4, even 5 weekly uploads. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram or on Twitter. My username for both platforms is the same. It's just JohnBallen416. I also have a ton of content over on TikTok where my username is MrBallen's. If you have a story suggestion, please submit it to our subreddit just called MrBallen. It's linked in the description below. So whether I see you on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, or some combination, just know that I really appreciate your support. And until next time, that's going to do it. See ya. Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, and today we're going to look at 3 stories that demonstrate that. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right channel because that's all we do, and we upload 3 or 4 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please tell the like button you're taking them on a week-long vacation to Universal Studios, but instead take them to the dentist for a root canal. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. On August 25th, 2010, a small twin-engine propeller plane sat on the tarmac at Kinshasa International Airport in the Congo. As the plane was being refueled, the co-pilots, 62-year-old Danny Philomot from Belgium and 39-year-old Chris Wilson from England, walked up the stairs and into the cockpit. As the pilots got settled in and began their internal systems checks, the flight attendant walked up the stairs. She said hello to the pilots, and then she began preparing the cabin for the passengers. The main cabin began boarding at 11 a.m., and by 11:30 a.m., all 18 passengers that were expected to board had taken their seats. So the flight attendant closed the doors, went into the cockpit, and told the pilots they were ready for takeoff. This was going to be a 1-hour-long routine domestic flight to Bandundu, which is a province that was just outside the border of Kinshasa to the east. This particular crew had made this flight dozens of times in the past without any issues. As the little plane made its way over to the runway, the flight attendant demonstrated what to do in case of various in-flight emergencies, and then by noon, the plane was airborne. 1 hour later, residents of a town located just southwest of Bandundu remembered looking up into the sky and seeing the small prop plane falling through the clouds in a near vertical nosedive. Seconds later, the plane crashed into the ground right in the middle of the neighborhood. Luckily, the crash did not kill anybody on the ground, but unfortunately, the pilots, the flight attendant, and 17 of the 18 passengers died on impact. And the one passenger that survived was very badly hurt and was left in a coma. An investigation was launched into what happened, and very quickly it was theorized that they must have run out of gas, because when they hit the ground, there was no explosion, there was no fire, but upon closer inspection, it would turn out the plane had plenty of fuel. The black box, which is a device that records the audio inside the cockpit, was recovered, but unfortunately it was inoperable, so it didn't give them any other clues as to what happened. Investigators were stumped. Did they strike a bird in the air? Did the engines suddenly fail? Was it operator error? They didn't know. A few days after the crash, the one surviving passenger miraculously came out of their coma and remembered in vivid detail what happened up in the skies right before they crashed. They said as the plane was making their final descent into Bandundu, the flight attendant was walking down the aisle reminding everyone to put away their big devices and put their seat in the upright position, and as she got about halfway down the aisle, she looked towards the back of the plane, and she suddenly gasped and covered her mouth, turned around and walked very quickly back towards the front of the plane into the cockpit where she disappeared. The passengers that had seen her do this were immediately concerned that something was wrong with the plane, and so they stood up and looked towards the rear of the plane where she had been looking, and right away they knew what it was she was concerned about. There was a hissing crocodile making its way up the aisle. Someone must have smuggled it on. And as passengers realized what was happening, they all panicked and stampeded towards the front of the plane. This sudden shift in weight threw off the plane's center of gravity, causing a nosedive that the pilots could not recover from before they crashed. After hearing this story, the investigators remembered that a living crocodile had been found around the wreckage, but no one had thought much of it because in the Congo, lots of exotic animals are smuggled onto flights. Specifically, Crocodiles are smuggled onto these planes with such regularity that passengers often can recognize the very specific crocodile smell somewhere in the cabin. And they'll tell the pilots, they'll come back, they'll find the crocodile and the owner of said crocodile, they'll kick them off before takeoff. But obviously this time, nobody smelled the crocodile. Just after midnight on April 4th, 2013, a man stepped out of his tent into the pitch black woods of central Maine. He was wearing a wool hat, he had a nice brand new Columbia jacket on, some Land's End jeans, and some high quality boots. He was carrying a backpack as well as another bag that contained a screwdriver along with some other tools. He adjusted his glasses and then looked up into the sky, and it was so dark he couldn't even see the moon, and he thought to himself, perfect. He turned and began quickly walking away from his tent into this forest where the trees were so dense that if you weren't careful, you could actually get stuck in between two trees. And scattered all over the ground were these huge slippery boulders covered in moss where one wrong step and you're breaking an ankle. But despite the rugged terrain and zero visibility, this man was able to easily navigate this area as if he had memorized every step. After an hour of silent hiking, he reached this huge pond called North Pond, and while staying hidden in the trees, he followed the shoreline until he reached the edge of the forest overlooking this clearing. And right in front of him were dozens of cabins overlooking this pond. This was Pine Tree Summer Camp. He waited in the tree line for a few minutes just listening to make sure nobody was out there, even though he knew their schedule and knew no one was there. After not hearing anything and feeling like the coast was clear, he stepped out of the woods and walked up to the top of the camp to the dining hall, and he made his way around to the back door. There, he pulled a screwdriver out of his bag and expertly popped open the lock and stepped inside. Once he was inside, he pulled out his tiny flashlight and he made his way over to the pantry where he began stuffing his bag full of candy, chips, and coffee. Once his bag was almost completely full, he walked over to the walk-in freezer, he went into his pocket and pulled out a key that he had stolen on a previous trip. He unlocked the lock, went inside, he grabbed some frozen hamburger patties and hot dogs, and then he left the freezer and locked it behind him. He did one more pass through the pantry and grabbed some more candy off the shelves and jammed them into his pockets, and then after feeling satisfied that he had all he could take, he decided it was time to leave. And so as he made his way to the door, he thought to himself, great, another successful raid complete. Or so he thought. A motion detector had recently been installed inside of the dining hall behind the ice machine. As soon as this man had pried open the back door, it had picked him up and remained silent, but sent an alarm to the nearby home of Sergeant Terry Hughes, who was a game warden that was investigating recent thefts in the area. Terry sped to the camp in under 4 minutes, and he parked his truck a ways away from the dining hall because he was worried he would scare off the perpetrator. So he parked his car and ran on foot, staying in the tree line until he got right behind the dining hall. He ran up to the back door and looked in the window, and he saw this tall, skinny man walking out of the walk-in freezer. And this guy did not look towards Terry. Instead, he turned and walked farther away from him over towards the pantry. This guy pulls a flashlight out, he shines it at one of the shelves, and he takes some things off the shelf and puts them in his pockets. And then after standing there for a minute, the man turns off his flashlight, faces Terry, and begins walking towards the back door. At this point, Terry backs off the window and goes behind a tree that's overlooking the back door. He gets his flashlight in one hand and he unholsters his pistol and he waits. Terry watched as this man barely opened the back door, he slinked out the crack, and then he began walking into the woods, and at that point Terry leapt out, shined the light in his face, drew his pistol, and told him to get on the ground. The man didn't resist, he immediately got on the ground, and Terry called the state police, who were there only a couple minutes later. They arrested this guy and put him on a chair, and then they began interviewing him. They asked him what his name was, and the man just remained silent. And so they searched him, but they couldn't find any form of identification, and so they asked him again, "What's your name?" And the guy, again, didn't say anything. So the officers decided to remove his handcuffs and give him a bottle of water, and then see if he would talk. And sure enough, he did. His speech was slow and awkward and kind of abrupt, like he had not spoken in a really long time. He told them his name was Christopher Knight and that he had been born on December 7th, 1965. He said he didn't have an address, he didn't have a vehicle, and he had never filed a tax return. He told them he lived in a tent in the woods nearby. They asked him how long he had been doing that for, and he paused for a minute and then said, "When was the Chernobyl nuclear plant disaster?" And the officers looked at each other and they were like, 1986. And he's like, "Yeah, that's when I went in the woods." And they were like, "That was 27 years ago." And Chris said, "Yeah." The officers asked him, well, 27 years is a long time. You got to be out there with some other people. Is your family out here? You got a girlfriend? You got, some sort of companion out there with you? And Chris said, "No, I live out there alone." And in fact, the last time I had a conversation with another person besides now was in 1990, when I happened to walk past another hiker and we both just said hi to each other. Besides that, for 27 years, it's just been me. And it would turn out Chris wasn't kidding, and he went to great lengths to ensure he stayed completely cut off from the rest of society. Despite winter temperatures dropping to -20 degrees, he refused to light a fire in fear of giving away his camp. And so instead, when it got that cold, he would just stay up all night pacing around his camp, trying to stay warm that way. He never even talked to himself or sang out loud because he was so worried someone might hear him, and he never left his campsite unless it was basically pitch black on an overcast night because he was afraid of being seen. When the officers asked him if he had access to the internet at least, he said, I haven't seen the internet. Chris wound up confessing to over 1,000 burglaries over the 27 years he had been out in the woods. He said he was ashamed of it, but originally when he had moved out into the woods, he had tried to hunt for his own food and forage for his own food, but he was terrible at it, so he had to resort to theft. He said he only robbed cabins and homes when he was certain no one was there, which meant sometimes going a long period of time between meals. And the food he did find made for a terrible diet. He mostly ate junk food and candy because it was stuff that was easy to find and kept fairly well. When asked why he had moved into the woods in the first place, he didn't really have an answer. Although in a later interview, he would say that growing up, human interaction had always been very difficult for him, and when he was in the woods, he just felt kind of content and at peace. When Chris's story broke, the residents around North Pond were shocked. For decades, they had swapped stories about someone or something haunting the area. Propane tanks, food, batteries, clothes, books would all go missing. They were starting to get scared, especially when it was overcast at night, because they knew that was when this person would come out. But despite staying up at night with their weapons out ready to confront whoever it was doing this, they never found him. And the police were repeatedly called to come in and try to solve this mystery, but they couldn't figure it out either. As the incidents mounted, the Phantom was given a name, the North Pond Hermit. When Chris was finally arrested and some of his life story was leaked to the media, residents of North Pond were torn on how to feel about him. Some people thought he was purely a criminal, that he was a thief, and that not only had he stolen their physical property, he had also stolen their peace of mind and their sanity. Others idolized him like he was some cult hero. He was a man that rejected what society says makes us happy: careers, relationships, material comforts. Yet he was happy. But regardless of how residents felt about his lifestyle, the one thing they could all agree on was how incredible it was that he survived for as long as he did. Winters in Maine are notoriously brutal and cold. A week of winter camping would be considered a huge accomplishment, let alone an entire season. That was totally unheard of, and Chris did entire seasons 27 years in a row. Ultimately, Chris was sentenced to 7 months in prison. When he was released, he was given 3 years of probation, and part of the conditions for his release is that every week he would have to go physically check in with the judge, which meant he would not be able to just escape back into the woods again. When his probation did finally end, he did not go running back into the woods. He decided to remain in society. In an interview, Christopher was asked what he learned from these 27 years in total isolation. What have you learned about the human experience? What did you learn about yourself? Tell us, because you have knowledge that virtually none of us will ever have access to. And apparently he just paused, thought about it for a second, and then looked up at the interviewer and said, "Make sure you get enough sleep." And then he got up and walked away. While we don't know exactly what Chris is up to these days, people that know him say he lives by himself in a small apartment, he has a regular job, and he values his privacy over everything else. One of the least known, most hazardous jobs on the planet is saturation diving. These highly specialized divers do construction and demolition at depths up to 2,000 feet below the surface. Now, unless you're familiar with diving, that depth may not stand out to you, but it should. Deep sea divers breathe compressed air, which is usually a mixture of oxygen, helium, and nitrogen. During the dive, the oxygen is breathed in and completely used up and does not linger inside of their body. But the helium and nitrogen, they are absorbed as they're breathed in into the bloodstream, and they remain there for the duration of the dive. As the diver ascends in the water column, the pressure on them from the water is reduced, which allows these two gases to clear out of their bloodstream. But they clear at different rates. Helium is considered a fast gas, which means you absorb it quickly and get rid of it quickly, but nitrogen is a little bit slower, and so it takes longer for it to absorb into your body, and then takes longer for it to clear out of your body. If a diver doesn't respect this and just rockets to the surface, any of the nitrogen or helium that did not diffuse out of their bodies will bubble up inside of them like a shaken soda, and it will wreak havoc on them, and many times it can be fatal. This condition is known as decompression sickness, or the bends. The way divers mitigate getting the bends is they have decompression stops in their dive, which means after they go down to a certain depth, on the way up, they will stop at a certain depth and just wait, and they will allow these gases to diffuse out of their bodies before making their way up to the surface. These decompression stops are planned and built into the dive beforehand. The deeper you go, the more frequent your decompression stops will be and the longer they will take. To give you a sense of just how long these decompression stops can be, if you dive down to just 250 feet, it might only take you about 15 or 20 minutes to get down there, but the return trip will take almost 4 hours due to the number of decompression stops. If you're going down to 2,000 feet, it will take you over 33 hours to ascend. Naturally, this ridiculous time constraint poses a huge problem for any industry that relies on deep sea work, like oil and gas, because they simply don't have enough divers to compensate for how long these decompression stops take. They tried sending remote-controlled vehicles down to these depths to work on these offshore wells and rigs and pipelines, but they lack the touch and maneuverability to do the job. And so, in the 1960s, a crazy solution was implemented to get more people down to these depths for longer periods of time. And it was then that the commercial saturation diver was born. Instead of divers spending hours and hours making all those stops on the way to the surface, they constructed these underwater chambers that the divers would go into after their shift was done. They would sleep inside of these claustrophobia-inducing metal chambers, and then the next day they would put their dive gear back on, hop outside of the chamber, and then just start working again. Nowadays, these chambers are either left down at depth where the diver is located, and they can just go in and out, and that's the whole process, or there's a dive bell that sits down near the work site, and the diver, when they're done, goes back into the dive bell. It kind of looks like an escape pod, and it's raised by a crane all the way up to the surface, where it's placed on top of a ship or a rig. And inside of this dive bell, the pressure is artificially made to match the depth they've been working at. And then when they're placed up on the surface on the ship or the rig, the bell is connected to a bigger chamber that's also set to the same pressure they're at down at depth. And they can go inside this chamber, they can sleep, they can eat, go to the bathroom, and then the next day the process is reversed where they go back into the dive bell, it lowers them down to depth, they hop out, and they continue their work. The point of this system is to keep divers fully saturated with their inert gases like nitrogen and helium so that they only have to do one major decompression at the very end of their shift, which is oftentimes multiple weeks long. Now, while the saturation diving system has worked extremely well, it's still extremely hazardous, which is part of the reason why it pays really, really well. Some divers have died because they panicked and got hurt. And if you think about what their job really entails, they are going down thousands of feet all on their own into total pitch black nothingness. They have one crummy light that can barely see about 10 feet in front of them. They're operating heavy, dangerous equipment. There are large animals swimming around them that they can't see. Oftentimes they're perched on a pipeline, clinging to it, that if they were to fall off of it and detach from the dive bell, they would sink into an abyss and no one could get them again. And so it's an easy place to get hurt. Other divers have died because they were given the wrong mixture of gas. And so at depth, they began having seizures, and there's nothing anyone can do to help them. But the most well-known and brutal saturation diving accident involved something called explosive decompression. On November 5th, 1983, 4 saturation divers were working off of the Byford Dolphin oil rig in the North Sea. Just after 4 a.m., 2 of the men, Edwin Coward and Roy Lucas, were in their bunks lounging inside of that chamber that sat up on the rig. The other 2 men, Bjorn Bergensen and Troels Hellevik, had just finished their shift down below. They had gone into the dive bell and were being raised by crane to go up to the chamber on the rig. Once the dive bell was up on the rig, 2 dive tenders named William Crammond and Martin Saunders began clamping the bell onto the side of the chamber. Without getting too into the weeds about how it actually works, getting divers to go from one highly pressurized area, the dive bell, into another highly pressurized area, the chamber, and vice versa, basically, it just boils down to opening doors at very specific times, and doing it wrong will result in catastrophe. The process was going just fine. Hellevik and Bergensen had exited the dive bell, they'd gotten into the chamber, and they were literally in the process of shutting their internal door when outside, dive tender Crammond made a huge mistake. Before Hellevik had sealed his door, Crammond, for whatever reason, undid the latch that connected the dive bell to the chamber. And what this did is it created a vacuum that instantaneously depressurized the chamber where the 4 men were from 9 atmospheres down to 1, and it created so much pressure coming out of the chamber that it fired the dive bell straight out like a bullet, killing Crammond and severely injuring Saunders on the outside. Inside the chamber, all 4 men literally had the air ripped out of their chests. Heljovic, who was closest to the door, was literally sucked through the narrow crack because the door had not sealed. He was sucked through and rocketed out the other side. Basically, all 4 men exploded, but fortunately, they died instantly. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know in the comments what it is and where you found it. And if you're the first to do that, we will pin you at the top of the comments section. If you enjoyed today's video and you haven't done this already, please tell the like button you're going to take them on a vacation to Universal Studios, but instead just take them to the dentist for a root canal. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly 3 or 4 video uploads. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram or on Twitter. My username for both platforms is the same. It's JohnBallen416. I also have a ton of content over on TikTok where my username is MrBallen. I also have a second YouTube channel called MrBallen's Shorts where I post short videos. If you have a story suggestion, please submit it to our subreddit just called MrBallen. It's linked in the description below. So whether I see you on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, or some combination, just know that I really appreciate your support, and until next time, that's going to do it. See ya.